I'm gonna make this pencil disappear.
The likelihood that you clicked on this video and also have never seen this moment play out before is, I would guess, as likely as you also trying this trick out for yourself and living to tell that story. But a recent viewing of The Dark Knight got me thinking about this moment a bit more than I had in the past. It's a moment that is surrounded by one of the greatest scenes in one of the most important movies of the past 2 decades. And how this moment was accomplished, the strange story of how it was filmed, and what makes this scene so special are still to this day, I think, worth talking about. How do you introduce the Joker? How do you set the pace of a character? And how do you make a pencil disappear? Our first introduction to the Joker in The Dark Knight is the opening bank sequence. We don't learn much other than the fact that he's calculated and brutal. It's this scene where we get a true introduction. When introducing a character, it's important, especially if that character is an adversary or a villain, to establish power, to establish their menace. I think the first thing this scene does spectacularly well is that power display, and it's kind of literal. The scene opens with these guys in control. They're the gangsters of Gotham. They're physically imposing, some are greasy, but they're all stereotypical Batman fodder. They hold control. Quickly the TV is placed down and we meet Lau, and this happens.
No one can know but me. If the police were to gain leverage over one of you, everyone's money would be at stake.
This is the first transition of power. Lau undresses the room, not only tells these men he can keep their money safe, but lets them know that without their permission, he's already taken it. He's calm and collected about it. This is important because we now have a clear dominant force. We see where the control over the moment lies. And then we get this moment. This shot is equally important. We walk in with the Joker, the camera right behind him, setting the stage for his arrival. We see just how outnumbered he is, how packed full of criminals the room is. We get perspective on the situation for the first time through his eyes, which makes it all the more remarkable when he not only takes control of this engagement, but here...
I know the squealers when I see them, and...
takes that power out of Lau's hands and into his to get what he wants. The very man that just a few moments before Joker's arrival shut this whole room up. This sequence shows us the viewers Joker's capacity for control. We see these transfers of power and we see him walk out of this room that looks like a death sentence, pulling the strings, establishing dominance, establishing control. It's excellent writing and even better acting from Heath Ledger. But this only works because of a meeting between a very lucky pencil and a very unlucky head. This moment is maybe one of the more iconic moments in modern film history, but it was also a unique challenge for a film that placed a lot of obstacles in front of itself. Let's start with what this moment accomplishes. It does 2 things. The first is it sets the tone for not only this particular scene, but for the Joker himself. The enjoyment he derives from the violence, the chaos, the pomp and circumstance. The pencil trick not only gets the attention of every hardened criminal in the room, but it also marks the beginning of that final power shift, and the transfer of pace of the scene to Heath. Without the pencil trick, the film doesn't give us a reason to believe that anyone in this room would respect Joker's menace, give him a chance to speak, and without it, we the audience may not either. In the bank, for example, Joker killed with purpose. He eliminated what he viewed as waste. Here, though, Joker pulls this trick out at the drop of a hat, on a moment's notice, and kills without thought. It isn't premeditated, it feels natural. It's terrifying. But it's the nuance, the tiny, almost unnoticeable details that give this moment its impact. Clearly, you can't shove a pencil through an actor's head, so how do you make this look real? And better yet, how do you make it feel visceral, physical? How do you nail a first moment of villainy? Turns out that's tough. See, Dark Knight was shot on IMAX, meaning that digitally placing things into the film was difficult. It would be nearly impossible, according to Christopher Nolan, to make that object look real. So, this scene was shot over the course of 2 days. 22 takes. Some shot with the pencil in place, the others shot without it. In post, a shot with the pencil and a shot without it were digitally composited together to create the final shot. It's part of the reason that when you slow it down, you don't actually see the head hit the table. But there's another reason for that. This moment only works if we feel it. Physicality, that feeling of impact. The moment where we, the audience, believe that this happened because it follows the physical laws that exist around us. Things move like we know them to move. For that, this guy had his head slammed against this table with a 1-inch rubber surface atop it for all 22 takes. He described it as slamming your head into a brick wall with a towel over it. He blacked out a total of 3 times throughout these 22 takes. In fact, the one time Heath broke character on set as the Joker was the first time in which the actor was knocked unconscious after hitting his head. And if you slow it down again, you can actually see Heath's hand tossing him backwards by his forehead after the impact. This makes it seem as though his head bounced violently off the surface. That small trick, combined with a commitment to physical and practical effects, and a little bit of damage to this guy's head, makes this moment believable, and it drives right through your eye and into that part of your brain that tells you something awful just happened. A lesser film would have tried to digitally recreate this shot in its entirety. A lesser film wouldn't have committed to making its violence seem like reality. The pencil trick is a moment where you realize almost immediately that The Dark Knight is not a lesser film. But it's what comes next that I think does a better job of setting the tone for the rest of the movie.
Little group therapy sessions in broad daylight. I know why you're afraid to go out at night. The Batman.
It's impossible to talk about what makes this scene special without talking about how dialogue is delivered. Nolan and Ledger do a great job of crafting and delivering dialogue here that introduces us properly to the Joker, but also, I think, more importantly, humanizes him. The most important element of this scene. Nolan's Batman universe isn't filled with superpowers and the supernatural. It's a relatively grounded, gritty, if not a bit fantastical version of Gotham City. And that means its villains, like the Joker, are real human beings. This sequence gives Joker control, demonstrates his menace, but also paints that human portrait. Throughout the scene, Nolan attempts to undress the Joker, like here.
You see a guy like me. Freak. A guy like me. Look, listen.
And here.
You're crazy. I'm not. No, I'm not.
Moments where Joker loses control of the conversation, the pace, and even shows what can be interpreted as a bit of insecurity, with not just his message, but his self. He's clearly tired of being called a freak or crazy. He's even more tired of being dismissed. And throughout this scene, as in control as the Joker wants to seem, through small vocal inflections and facial expressions, Heath Ledger is able to get across that bit of madness, that bit of uncertainty that comes from chaos. It would have been very easy to write a scene, or even act out a scene as a villain that commands a room with pure, unfettered confidence and fear, to create a monster that we inherently want gone. But in a room filled with much more menacing physical beings, how absurd would it look if he, of all people, did that? If he was just like these guys we don't particularly care about. If the Joker, this guy here, out-gangstered the gangsters. What a disservice that would be to a villain the film doesn't want us to quite understand. It's exactly how the Joker was written in this film, and that didn't work out too well. This scene sets a clear tone for the rest of the film. We don't understand this character, what he wants, who he is, and that uncertainty is played with throughout the rest of the film, as the changing stories of his scars pile drive home, and his brand of misdirection unfolds.
Why so serious?
I discussed a second scene from The Dark Knight at length in my Joker video before the Oscars, but while I think that scene might be a better display of Heath's performance as the Joker, I think that this scene may be the finest moment in the film. From a writing, acting, and directing perspective, it is nearly perfect. It gets almost everything right, and it remains as iconic a scene that the genre has ever produced. It's hard to introduce a villain. It's even harder to establish the villainy. The Dark Knight didn't just do it well, it did it in a way we hadn't seen before. Superhero movies are fun. Some are great, some not so much. But from this scene on, The Dark Knight set a standard that still has not been met again. In one magic trick, this clown marked a shift in power in an industry that to this day still hasn't figured out how to take it back from him.
It's gone.
Well guys, that is it for this episode of Nerdstalgic. If you enjoyed the video, press the like button down below. If you haven't yet done so, also hit subscribe. That'll make sure you don't miss anything I put out on this channel. Also, next to the subscribe button is a little bell, just a notification bell. If you hit that, you'll actually be notified when I upload. Helps me out a lot, so hit subscribe and the little bell. And as always, on your screen right now are 2 more episodes of Nerdstalgic. You can see what I talked about recently. And hopefully I will see you guys in the next video.